Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is our alumni Q&A session with Emily Ho, who's to my either left or right of me on your screen. I'm Emma. If you haven't met me before, I'm one of the admissions team here at Designlab, and I'm just going to be here doing the question and answer session for Emily to give all of her wonderful insights about the programme and what she's done afterwards. So we have actually curated quite a lot of questions from the community already, so thank you for anyone who's input some of those and sent them across to Emily. That's been great. And first of all, I'm just going to get her to introduce herself. So who are you, Emily? Why are you here? What are you going to tell us about?
Hi guys, so I'm Emily. Some of you guys may already know me. I am currently the Designlab Community and Student Advocate. So I am, if you guys are in UXA, I am your point of contact for pretty much everything. If you're new to Designlab and our webinars, welcome. So again, my name is Emily. I was most recently a senior UX designer at a startup here in San Diego. Previously, I had pretty much done all contract work. And that was kind of how my journey started after UXA. So I had joined UXA in 2016, June 2016, and I graduated in March of 2017 and landed my first contract job not too long afterwards. And then we'll kind of dive into that in a little bit. But I'm really excited to be here. I know that a lot of you guys are probably looking to career switch, which is exactly what I did. I don't come from a design background at all. So don't feel like you need to know design to be a great UX designer. It's so much less about the artistic part of it, and it's so much more about how you think about things. So I'm excited to dive in.
Awesome. Thanks for that introduction, Emily. I see everyone saying hi in the chat there, so keep saying hi. It's great to have you all online with us today and to see where you're all coming from. So you'll notice that you've got the chat tab and the questions tab. So obviously this is naturally a Q&A session anyway, but what we'll do is we'll go through the curated questions that we have already, and then if you've got anything else that you want to hear about after we've gone through all of that, feel free to put it in the questions tab and we'll get through as many as we can by the time the hour is up. So first of all, Emily, obviously you started to give a little bit of information about your journey already, but just starting about, before UX Academy, what were you doing and what made you initially interested in learning more about UX?
Yeah.
UI?
Yeah. So prior to being in UXA, I had worked in retail for about 10 years and then worked on a support team for a tech company for about 2.5 years. And then that's when I decided I'm done with this. I want to kind of dive deeper and solve problems, I guess at a much deeper level. And to me, that looked like a combination of all of my careers. So I feel like every time I talk to new students, everyone's talking about that, wanting to career switch and why is it so? And I feel like the trend is, I'm a creative person, but I'm not an artsy person. I'm a creative person, meaning that I can problem solve, I can create solutions, I can design the solutions, but I'm just not great at how things look like. But I have a great analytical and logical mind, and I want to combine that with creativity. So I feel like that's kind of the pattern for what I've heard from students, and that's exactly like how I felt. When I worked in retail, I worked in all parts of retail. So I worked in sales, on the sales floor, I worked in the back of house, I worked as management, and my favorite part of retail was doing visual merchandising. And it was mostly because every season when we went through a large visual change in the store, it's because we were trying to tell a story. We're trying to tell a story of the season, of how the clothing changes, all that stuff. So when you ever walk into a retail store, you'll notice that all the new merchandise is in the front and all the older ones are in their back. It's because we're trying to tell a story. We're trying to kind of move time along as with clothing placement. So that's kind of how I felt kind of initially, when I was looking into UX. When I worked in support, those of you who have been in a customer service or, customer facing environment, you guys know that you guys hear a lot of problems, a lot of issues. Like it's so rare that you hear someone just telling you what a great job you did. So really like you're faced with so many problems and you're given so many resources and tools as a support agent. So you kind of have to make do with what you have. So at the end, I feel like a lot of us end up creating or designing some of our own solutions just so customers can feel like, they got the best help that they deserved. So really that kind of drove me to, how do I combine all of that together? Like how do I get creative with my solutions, but also, be able to, kind of invoke a lot of thought behind it. So I'm someone who questions the heck out of everything. I ask why about everything. I will ask a bunch of questions, and it's mostly because I want to get to know all the details, all the information before I dive in to figuring out what the answer is. So long story short, that's kind of what drove me to UX was, I have this brain. I always, come up with solutions, but I wanted to do it in a creative way. So UX just kind of felt like the perfect kind of career for me. And it sounds so cliche. I feel like I hear that a lot, but it really does feel like the perfect career.
No, I think it's perfectly true. And like we hear so many people saying that they really love like problem solving and finding solutions to problems for people. And obviously that's perfectly what UX is, mixed in with the creative side. Like you mentioned, it's a very good mix of analytical and sort of, psychology type aspects mixed in with creativity. So it's an awesome blend of all of that. Awesome. So when you were sort of starting out on your learning journey, like how did you come across Designlab? Why did you choose Designlab over other learning routes and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So when I first heard about UX, I was still working on the support team, and my coworker, her partner, had finished the UX immersive at General Assembly. So that's kind of what got me thinking. Like I heard the term UX, I knew what it stood for. I knew it stood for user experience, but past that, had no idea what it was about at all. So really, what kind of kickstarted me was hearing that someone had completed a program. I dove deeper. I started with General Assembly, got on a call with them, and what really, and this just kind of dials back into my retail background, what really kind of didn't rub me the right way was more that they really cared about just getting me in. It was about numbers for them. I felt like, they just kept pressuring me to, oh, when do you want to sign up? When do you want to sign up? But when I had questions about the program and just kind of the logistics, like I just felt like they weren't listening to me. And that was kind of what I felt when I had kind of explored other options. And then when I came across Designlab, it was so new. And I'm just someone, I judge things based on website. I judge things based on like content that they put out. Designlab was so new where I was just like, I just don't know if there's enough information from Designlab for me to really go with that. But what really sold me was, one, I actually got on the phone with Harish. Harish actually did a kind of sales call with me. He's our CEO, and really he listened. That was really what sold me on Designlab, was that he listened and he empathized, and it didn't seem like he was just trying to get me to sign up for the sake of signing up. And that to me was gold. Again, coming from retail, I've learned that empathy is a very, very strong thing. It's a very strong quality to have. And that's really what sold me. On top of that, I felt like Designlab offered everything that General Assembly did, in terms of mentorship and being able to have, FaceTime with other students and just a community. But I worked full time, and there was no way that I could give up my job full time. So what was great about Designlab was that they offered basically the same thing at a part-time pace, which was something that wasn't offered with a lot of boot camps at the time. It was either you go full time, you get the full immersive experience, or you go part time and you only get part of the curriculum, which I kind of felt was not a great selling point for me. So Designlab kind of checked all my boxes, and 4 years later, I'm still here. I'm working with Designlab, and I'm here helping build that community out even more.
Yeah, it's fab. No, that's super cool to hear, sort of where, that was way back. It was 2016, right? So, that was like way back when UX Academy was only a year old, and it was all baby steps. But, it's great to see how it's grown since then. Yeah, awesome. So obviously you mentioned that you haven't got any, prior to UX Academy, you didn't have any design experience. You knew you were creative, but you hadn't got any like core design skills or anything like that. So with that in mind, I know a lot of our audience are, they do have slight concerns about that, because they think, I haven't done any design work before. Am I going to be good? Is it going to be the right fit for me? So what kind of advice do you have for anyone that is feeling that way and hasn't got any of that prior design experience?
Honestly, I feel like with the amount of tools that are available today, even in comparison to when I started, tools have gotten more simple. So when I started, Sketch was pretty much the only main UX tool that was out there. It was really made for UX. It was a slimmed down version of Adobe Illustrator, where it took all the really important pieces and the really popular pieces of it, and it put it into this tool that really just made it so much more functional for someone like me. I guess maybe I lied a little bit saying I didn't have enough of a design background, but I was never a designer, so that's why I never count. I never counted. So I had my bachelor's in psychology. I ended up doing a separate associate's at the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising in LA. And I actually was a visual communications major. And there was when I did my intro to Photoshop, intro to InDesign, intro to Illustrator, but I did not dive in any deeper than what those assignments asked me to do. But that was really my only introduction to using those tools, other than me just having access to them in the past and just, playing around with it, photoshopping my own photos at some point. But no formal, no real design experience beyond that. So, I mean, really my advice is just try all the tools. If you're just unfamiliar, or if it's just, you're so used to using one and you're even afraid to dive into another one, it can't hurt to try more. It can't hurt to learn more. That's the beauty of our industry. Things are constantly evolving, not just UX patterns and behaviors and us needing to keep up with how people interact with technology and just everything around us, but everything is changing. Even the tools that we use to get to our finished product changes a lot. So it's something that happens all the time. So I would say once you take that initial step and just embrace all that change and just, accept that that's how it's going to be as part of your UX career, it's going to make things so much easier. A curious mind is probably the best thing to have as a UX designer.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. And we've actually had a few questions, like live questions, come in on the opposite side of things about people who have had design experience. A lot of people go straight into the UX Academy, take Design 101 first, but they have got some design experience either in industrial design, architecture, graphic design. They're sort of the main ones that we see, but obviously there's a wider variety of that as well. What would you say about those people? So Dave, for example, mentioned that he's currently in industrial design and he wants to switch into the UX UI field, but his concern is that he doesn't want to turn back on the 6+ years of experience that he's already got, and he doesn't want to start completely from scratch. Do you think what would the journey be like for those types of people, and what kind of positions would you think they'd be able to get afterwards?
I feel like when you come in, it's going to be daunting, right? Because you're going to be so afraid of, I don't want to fall back into my old habits. I don't want to go back to what I used to do. Like, I want to make this work, but at the same time, I also know that what I've been doing has been working for me, right? So that's kind of the challenge. I would say, oh my God, I lost my train of thought. So I don't know. I mean, if you've had design experience before, I feel like the beauty of UX is that it's more of a mindset. It's about process versus just the word design. If you take out the word design, right? I feel like a lot of us, or at least a lot of people, when they hear the word design, they kind of combine that almost the same as or treating it the same as the word art, like being an artist. I would never ever claim to be an artist, but I do claim to be a designer, and the reason is because I feel like for me, design means that you're thinking about the beginning, middle, and end, right? You're thinking about the story, and you're designing what that experience looks like, what that journey looks like. And if you've been a designer in any capacity, I feel like you already have that mindset. You already have that mindset of what's to expect in the beginning, what should we expect in the middle, and what should we expect in the end. So I feel like when you do come from other industries where you can clearly see that there's some crossover. Like for me, I come from support. And a lot of that was problem solving. So it's more, I would say, it's the soft skills that matter versus, just thinking about, oh, am I going to be able to figure out the tools? Am I going to be able to design something nicely? I would say just know that it's the mindset, and that's what's really going to help your transition into UX design, regardless of whatever type of design you came from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think anyone that has got prior design experience of some extent, they naturally take to the learning and the material better, obviously, because they've got some understanding of it already. And they can expect, I would say, to go into sort of more mid-level positions maybe after the program, I think, and that's much more of a realistic journey, I would say. Cool. Okay, so let's move on to talking about the actual UX Academy program itself then. So overall, how did you find the program? What was your favorite part of it? What was your biggest struggle on the other side of things?
My favorite part was finding people who were like-minded. And I know that sounds so, again, cliche. It's such a popular answer with so many of our prospects, so many of our students, but really finding other people who thought like me and didn't think it was annoying, that you would ask 5 billion questions about one thing before even making a decision. I am very indecisive. Let's be real. I still can never choose what I want for dinner, but at least with UX, I am so confident, and and I feel like it's conditioning from being in support. You want to know all the facts and all the information before you make any form of a decision. So that was my favorite part, was finding people who actually understood why I did that without questioning me or making me feel bad that I did that. I would say my biggest struggle was that I worked full time while doing the course part time. the course part-time, 20 hours a week, it's still a lot if you are, especially if you're someone working full-time. But many of us know that full-time doesn't mean just the 40 hours a week anymore. It's probably closer to like 50 or 60 hours a week, right? Like normally. And then that doesn't include all the other life responsibilities that you have to do. So it wasn't necessarily about time management, but it was just more the fact that I am such a perfectionist and I am a workaholic. So I can't just lay off the gas pedal on anything. So it's more like if I have to go all at once or I don't go at all. So that was probably my biggest challenge.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And what we do see sometimes is that, learning design is quite different to a traditional academic subject. It's not that you turn things in and that's it. You get a grade and, blah, blah, blah. It is very much an iterative process and you've got your mentor there to guide you, etc. So what would you say, what would your biggest tips be for people who are struggling a little bit with transitioning to that learning style as well of submitting during revisions, etc. What would your biggest recommendations would be in that regard?
Well, like you just mentioned, UX is an iterative process, right? So part of that iteration is getting feedback, and sometimes getting feedback, it could be good, it can be bad, but know that especially in UX, like the feedback that you get, it's never personal. So don't ever beat yourself up for, maybe not getting it on the first try or the second try. But if you continuously, seek to ask questions and seek answers, and you're always looking for feedback and looking for ways to improve, that's the best thing that you can do. I would say, yeah, definitely don't beat yourself up. And then don't, I would say, especially, this is probably something that I've seen from people who have stronger design backgrounds coming in. They're trying to add UX to kind of their skill set. You may have been doing design for a very long time. Like if you've been a graphic designer, a visual designer, you're very used to, certain how things should look, and you have your process. So I would say, especially for people coming in with prior process or prior knowledge, I wouldn't say wipe the slate clean, keep your knowledge in the back of your head, but go in with an open mind. Know that, that feedback is part of the process and that it's only going to make your work better.
Yeah, for sure. And just going back to that time management thing. So obviously you mentioned you were a perfectionist, you had other stuff going on, which is fair enough. And I think a lot of people are in the similar position. So, with that being said, how did you set up your schedule so that you were able to be successful through the program? And did your time management and things progress through the program or in the job itself? How did that all go?
I feel like I'm the worst example of time management because and I work very well under pressure. So if I only have an hour left to do something, I will get it done, and I will 92% of the time it'll be oh wow, how much effort did you put in this? And I'm an hour. So that's real. So I am that person. So guys, I am a horrible example. But when I did work and do the program at the same time, my schedule was typically, so I'm an early bird. I don't like doing anything at night, especially after a long work day. So my schedule at work was, typical 9 to 5 schedule. So I would show up at the office at 7 o'clock every morning, do some design lab work from 7 to 9, work my shift, and then do some design work in the middle of the day if I had project time or, whatever. Night times, very rarely did I do any work because that was my time to wind down from work and then from design. Saturdays was my free day. So there was no work, no design. It was just all errands and it was my take or break day. And then Sundays, the last day of the design lab week, guys, was my 16-hour day. So I would wake up really, really early and just work all day long. So that's the kind of person I am. So, but if I had to kind of break it up even more, I am someone who's definitely, I prefer to work in large chunks versus, working 50 minutes and then taking a 20-minute break. So if I have to get myself in the mindset, and I don't know, usually it's music. Usually just putting on music kind of just helps me settle down a little bit and find my groove. So that's how I typically work, and that's how I figured out kind of how to manage my time. But let's be real, that's probably what I did in college too, and it was not a good idea.
No, I think everyone has their own little funny things with that, don't they? Cool. I've just actually quickly seen the question that's asking if you're going to get a recording of this afterwards. So yes, you are. So if you've got to go at any point, don't worry. We'll be sending around a recording of this afterwards. We're also going to post it on YouTube at some point soon as well.
Yes,
so you'll have it forevermore. So don't worry. Cool. So on the topic of project work then, so I was thinking that, you mentioned that you like having big blocks of time to get stuck into your coursework and everything. And obviously that's very good when you're getting stuck into your portfolio pieces and doing really in-depth project pieces. So, you know, with the UX Academy program, you now get 4 portfolio projects by the end of the program. So I was just wondering, like, how you went about the capstones in particular when you did the program. Like, how did you choose what to do them on? And, you know, did you involve any real world projects, and what would you recommend for students at that point in the program?
So I would say, so the capstone part of program is the most fun part, and not to say that the first phase isn't fun. It is, but in its own way. But the capstone part it's more fun because for me it was less structured, and that's what I genuinely loved about it. And I could kind of set my own goals per project, which was awesome. How I went about choosing what I wanted to focus on or which project I wanted to do, I actually had that conversation with my mentor. And we came down with, you know, we probably don't want to only do projects that showcase what I'm really good at, because part of the learning process is I'm still learning. So I do not ever think that I'm great at visual design, even though I've been told otherwise. But really, like, I visual design is such a subjective thing for me, guys. So like, if you ever ask me my opinion on that, I'll be like, yeah, I guess that looks good, because it's a subjective thing. But really, so I told my mentor, like, hey, these are the things I would like to highlight as far as the things I'm really good at. And I'm sorry, guys, you're going to hear my dog complain now. And then I told him that I would like to work on something that I don't think I'm great at. So visual design was one of the focuses of one of my capstone projects. And then the other one was more focused on research and then the UX process before we get into UI. So more about discovery, research, and then make, you know, low fidelity wireframes. So just kind of things that led up to UI. So those were kind of how I focused it. So at the time, I only had to choose 2 projects. So part of me wishes I had 3, because then really I feel like I would get like a full breadth of, you know, be able to showcase like all the things that I can and can't do. But really that's just kind of how I went about choosing what I wanted to work on.
Awesome. And when it came to like pulling all of that work together into your portfolio, like, how did you craft that into some sort of story? How did you then, you know, when you went to interview it and were talking about your portfolio to employers, how did you go about all of that?
Yep. So I guess the story that, you know, that I aim to tell, it's really the process that I took, you know, from beginning to whatever end I chose. So for anything that's more visual design focused, you know, my portfolio will typically showcase, you know, initial findings, any type of, you know, research discovery, and then do, you know, very light on, show kind of light iterations, but then go heavy on what the more final designs look like, or just the process and how I decided my designs would look like. But for projects that were more UX focused and research focused, that's where I showcase that part of my story. So, you know, like, how deep did I go into the research? What was the reasoning behind it? What did I get out of it? And how did those data points kind of affect my design decisions, you know, whether it be placement or whether or not to include or not include a feature. So that was kind of how I illustrate my story. It really is meant to illustrate my process, versus, you know, just, I don't try to include everything from end to end, because sometimes it's just not the focus of what you worked on. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Mm-hmm. Sweet. And you know, during all of that project work and like afterwards in your jobs and everything, and what resources do you keep turning to, you know, quite frequently? Have you got any rules of thumb for things that you always use, or any processes you always like start things off with when it comes to your projects?
I feel like this heavily depends on where you end up getting a job, because for the most part, most of the contract jobs and just the full-time jobs that I've had, I've been the only designer. So I'm fortunate enough to be able to dictate the tools that I want to use. So, you know, Sketch is my go-to tool, but I feel like I'm getting so comfortable with it that it's probably time for me to start digging into another tool just to get familiar with it. So Figma or Adobe XD will probably be my next tool that I dive into. I am loving that all these interfaces look pretty much the same. So I feel like I won't be as lost as I felt like when I first started. Again, like, it really depends on what the company or the job, you know, really requires or would like to focus on. For the most part, at none of my jobs have they really cared about fully built out prototypes. They just care about being able to show all the different states of my screens and all the interactions. So they, you know, some companies don't care about prototypes. Some companies don't care about wireframes. You know, some only want the final mock-up and they don't care what process you take to get there. So, I mean, I think my go-to is, you know, I typically have my normal, like, is there going to be research? Yes or no? Do you do low fidelity wireframes? Yes or no? Do you do high fidelity? Yes or no? And do you do prototyping? Yes or no? And then at the end, do we do user testing? So those are kind of like the 5 areas that I typically will start poking around if I get any job. And then based on the answers that I get, that kind of determines what my go-tos are. But those are kind of my usuals.
Yeah, the way you go about it. Nice. Cool. So, in regards to like the workflow that you mentioned, so Designlab, and I guess any program would teach you a certain way, like a certain design workflow to, go through and when you're doing all of your pieces. So how much do you find that was relevant when you actually got into the workplace? Like, did it translate quite well, or have you had to adapt certain bits from how you were taught to how you actually do it in your job?
Oh, there definitely is going to be adaptation. And I would even say that so in phase 1 of UXA, you learn the full end-to-end UX process, everything from discovery all the way to user testing. And like I think I just previously mentioned, like you don't use all of that at every job, but it is good to know that, it's good to know, because there are times where I have been at jobs and I'm like, if only we focused on research, we wouldn't have these problems down the line. So, there's definitely adaptation. And, some of that is also just determined by whether or not the company wants to put time and effort into it. So there's kind of an area to adapt there. They either may want more or less emphasis on a certain part of the process. So, if you're used to doing less research, but a company that has hired you wants to start, implementing and focusing more on research, that's probably something that you're going to have to learn alongside them. So yeah, I would say, take in as much of the process as you can, and just know that not everything is going to fit exactly to the T of what you learned. And that's probably not just for Designlab. That's probably, not even just boot camps. It's probably just any type of educational institution where you can go and apply the things that you've learned. Not everything's going to be exactly to the T.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's just part of the whole, iterative and adaptable, flexible, like agile nature of the whole thing anyway. Yes. So yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, cool. So we're going to sort of move on now to talk about what happened after UX Academy. So obviously, like the UX Academy, as things stand, we have UX Academy and then we have career services. So once you graduate the boot camp, you then get all of the follow-up job support and guidance and career coaching and all that stuff. So I was just wondering, after you finished UX Academy yourself, how long did it take you to get your first job, and how was that whole process for you?
So I'm gonna preface now that I think my story might seem a little too optimistic from reality. So I was actually approached by a Creative Circle recruiter about a freelance job, so about a contract position, the week that I was graduating. So I decided to just go in and just meet up with the recruiter and just get to know her, what Creative Circle can offer me, what the position was. And then pretty much in the next 2 days, things snowballed, and then a local agency in La Jolla actually wanted to bring me on as their designer. So I actually had to quit my job in 3 days, which I had never done before. It created so much anxiety. And I mean, really, part of that anxiety was the fact that I was leaving a very secure full-time job that I was able to work remotely for a chance. So basically a contract job that really had no end date. They didn't know how long it would go for. Basically it was a chance. It was basically my leap of faith moment. And I decided to do it. And this is where I am today. It did not, I guess, serve me wrong, but I will say that, it didn't last as long as I anticipated. So I initially, because I got the position right around the time I graduated, I didn't get to make use of career services until after my first position. So like you guys all know, I was in Designlab in 2016. So a lot of things were still in the making. So I was able to take advantage of career services after my first position, but that was mostly because I had not taken advantage of it at all. So I was able, Designlab was so gracious to be able to partner me with a career services mentor. And then she was able to give me a little bit more guidance and confidence in landing my next role after that first contract job.
Awesome. So when you came back around to using the career services support and doing more interviews and all that type of thing, how did you find that whole process? What would you recommend any students or prospective students that they prepare for when it comes to interviewing in the UX UI field in general? I'm sure they'd love to hear some more about that.
I mean, in terms of, actual things like deliverables that you can prepare, like you can prepare your case studies as much as possible. You can prepare all the files as much as possible, but really it's you that it's you, your personality, that is probably what I found like means the most in interviews. So, there have definitely been interviews where I've landed jobs and I walked out of there not feeling great. But they gave me feedback afterwards. And really the reason why they hired me was because of my passion and my drive to want to make this work. So I would say like it has less to do with file prep and just, prepping your work. It has everything to do with how you want to present yourself, how you want them to kind of take you as a UX designer. What do you want them to know about you? That's also what I found in the UX industry, is that people are genuinely interested in who you genuinely are. They're not just about, what boxes do you tick, what tools do you know, what things on my job requirements list do you check off? Like it's not fully about that at all. Like so much of, being a UX designer and being hired as a UX designer are your soft skills. So if anything, those are the things I would focus on prepping more than the other pieces. Not saying that they're not important, but I'm saying like soft skills are equally as important as your actual project work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. That's really interesting to hear. I think that's obviously adds into the whole like storytelling, like personal nature of your portfolio, and why that's really important as well.
Yep.
Cool. So like, how did you try and decide between picking like a generalist position or a specific role? Like, how did you choose between all of that, and how has that all played out for you?
So because I had mentioned that I do not think I'm at all great at visual design or UI design, I already knew that that's the area I was not going into. So in terms of specializing, if I had my choice, I would actually choose to go into research, because I can sit there and ask questions all day and try to dive deeper and find deeper meaning to everything and try to synthesize my results and all that. So if I had a choice, I would go into research, but that's also an area I have not really dove into yet. So that's why it's still intriguing to me. So if I were to split the design process in half, and we called one UX and one UI, if I were to specialize, it would be more on the UX part. So everything up until making things look really, really sharp and clean and pretty, that's where I would stop and go, here you go, I'm going to let you guys do this. But other than that, for the most part, I've been more of a generalist. And that's just, again, like the nature of being a solo designer on so many teams. You have to be. There's no way that you can be a specialist and then be the only designer unless they only want you for visual design. They're like, no, we're not changing anything about UX. We just want you, to work on facelifts and all that stuff. But it's so rare to be a solo designer and to be able to kind of specialize.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's what a lot of people like find so appealing. And I think it adds a lot of confusion initially, though, because there are so many different roles that you can go for. But I think if anyone's sort of listening or watching and thinking, oh, what should I aim for? You don't have to worry about that right now. Like a lot of our students go through, they get more of a generalist position initially, like UX/UI designer even. So you've got the full breadth of skills there. And then after a couple of years, they then think, oh, I really want to specialize down in the UI side, or I really want to specialize down the UX research side, like you mentioned. So that can all come later. There's not even though there's a lot of job roles and everything flying around, it's nothing too much to get worried about at this point. So that's all good.
Yeah, you can always kind of frame it as, if someone asks you during a job interview, if they go, do you have a preference for, would you want to be a UX or UI designer? And if you feel like you're just more of a generalist, but you would like to focus more on one area, you can always share that too. Like that, sometimes it's just good for them to know, because oftentimes with UX, right, we will like to play to people's strengths. And it's not to say that we don't want to grow in, areas of opportunity, help you grow in those areas, but, we love to play to people's strengths. And, if you're like, I can do all of it, but I really, really like this part, that's great. Especially if it's research, they'll love you. Trust me.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so with all of that in mind, is there anything like about the job search or anything in general that you wish you'd known before even starting the boot camp? What is there anything that you want to like some little bits of information or tips or tricks that you want to share with our audience today in that regard?
God, I feel like the job market has changed so much in the last 4 years since I was job hunting, because back then, like I had to search all the titles: UX designer, UI designer, visual designer, even graphic designer, UX developer, UI developer. I had to search every single title possible, just to get a feel for what jobs were out there, for someone like me. But now I feel like you can type in UX design and you'll actually see UX designer titles out there. If you type in interaction design, you'll see interaction design. So I feel like over the last couple of years, the titles have kind of, I wouldn't say they've completely figured themselves out, but I think because UX is so much more prevalent now and companies are realizing the benefit that UX designers can give to them, they're finally realizing, what their needs are, and then, giving the more appropriate titles I've kind of like seen. I mean, I wish I knew what the job market looks like, I had a better idea for when I started and when I was job hunting. But I mean, honestly, now I would still say this piece of advice from my mentor still holds true, even if the title says senior or if it says junior, or, it's something that just seems like it's out of your league. If you think that you can do a good 3/4 or even slightly more of that job, apply for it. Just because it says senior doesn't mean that they won't consider someone more green or someone with less experience. Because really, sometimes they put out senior because in companies' minds, they're thinking, oh, if we just get someone who knows what they're doing, we don't have to train them as much. That's not true. You can know all the tools, but a senior designer or a junior designer is still going to have to learn about the product. They're still going to have to learn about the service. So, sure, a senior designer may be able to pick it up sooner, but that's not a guarantee. So I would say that, there's no harm in applying for positions that seem out of your league, because you never know what they're actually looking for. Something that my mentor also told me, he basically was like, recruiters typically put together all these job requirements with a bunch of, tools that you need to know and knowledge and all that. So most of the time recruiters just put that on there because that's either what they're told to put on there or they just don't know. So they include everything. So if you see, you need to know Adobe and you need to know Sketch and Figma and Azure, you don't. I trust me, you don't. Like, that's a question that you can ask like during an interview. You can, ask them like, oh, what tools do you guys typically use? Stuff like that. So yeah, I would say like, don't let titles and job, the descriptions like deter you from applying. Like, just go for it. There's no harm in it. My dog agrees too.
So yeah, no, I think that's a really good bit of advice. I can see there's a lot of questions like coming in about the job market and everything at the moment, which is obviously particularly important at the moment with the current situation going on. So I was just wondering, like, from your experience and where you are, particularly in the world and things, like, how have you seen the job market change? What do you suggest people who do if they're looking for jobs at the moment or preparing to go into the job search? Have you got any sort of insights or tips in that regard?
So San Diego is probably one of the worst job markets to find a design job. So I've really put myself in a hole here, guys. But I would say, if you're just starting out in the program, it doesn't hurt to kind of get a sense for what your area kind of offers in terms of UX jobs if you plan to stay in the area. I remember an older student, she lives in San Diego. But at the time, I had moved around the country a lot. So to me, I'm someone who is willing to move for work. I'm willing to kind of go to a different place, live there, mostly because that's my way of getting to know a different place and saying, I've lived in a different place. So it kind of gives me a reason to. But that's not an option for everybody. So I would say, if you are planning to stay where you are, do your research as early as possible in terms of what jobs are available, what companies are even available. Start scouting any companies that you would like to work for, and just start getting to know like what they offer. If what industries are typically prevalent in your area, that's helpful as well. So in San Diego, we have a lot of biotech and a lot of medical companies. And only recently, probably this year, where I'm starting to see more UX positions for them. And I'm someone who's like, oh, healthcare and education, they need UX. But yeah, so I would say like, do your research. If you are open to moving, I would say that's probably one of the bigger advantages that you have. Or if it's something that you can consider, maybe it's not like a, yes, I can do it, but if it's something that you're willing to consider, only because different markets, like I said, like here we have biotech and medical, but we don't have a lot of true tech startups like you would find, like in San Francisco or Seattle. So we don't have that here. So, I would say other markets, they offer like so many advantages, like of different companies and different, industries. So just, if you're looking to be in a specific industry and that industry is not there, that's probably something you may have to get real with yourself on. Like, do I care more about the industry or do I care more about the job? And really, there's no wrong answer, but it's more setting yourself up for success. Because if you try to convince yourself over and over again that, you should just take the job, even though you don't, I know it sucks to say, but you don't care about the product, the product or the service, like at some point, like it'll just be a job to you. So, if you can find something that is at least remotely engaging while you work on it, you don't have to be fully engaged, but you shouldn't hate what you're working on either, because, you know, part of being a UX designer, they rely on your passion to help drive the product and its success. So if you don't have that passion, it'll show.
Oh, absolutely. And it does become even more obvious as you go through, I can imagine. And obviously, you know, a lot of basically all the positions that our students are landing at the moment are remote positions because of the situation. Like, not really anyone's in the office. Like, really, luckily, our industry can be done online and remotely to a huge extent, and therefore it's adapted very well to that environment. And you know, I just want to give a bit more information to the audience at the moment, because I know that obviously we're in this pandemic at the moment. You know, the things are going on, and we have been doing a bit of research into the job market since the beginning of the year. And obviously, naturally, the opportunities have declined because of the situation. But what's really good is that they are looking to stabilise now, and certain areas are like increasing again. So I think, you know, if you are having any concerns about that, or you're having any issues at the moment, like, keep persistent, because everything is starting to turn around, and we've got the data is all showing that. So that's really, really encouraging.
You know what's really quick? So I want to tell everyone. So Twitter, surprisingly, so I'm not a big Twitter user, but Twitter surprisingly has a ton of job postings on there, and even more remote job postings. Everyone is. I've not seen the UX community come together and so loudly, like on a platform before. Like LinkedIn, I remember the first few weeks of everyone being on lockdown. I've not seen so many designers just go in there and offer, you know, let's do resume reviews. Let me help you redesign your resume. Let me help you get a new job. And then on Twitter, you know, everyone's cross posting everywhere. Hey, so-and-so is hiring. Hey, they're specifically calling out, like, we're looking for remote designers. Doesn't matter where you are. So Twitter is a huge like resource, like job hunting resource, which I wish I was more involved on back in the day, but now it's booming. It's awesome on there.
Yeah, so I always see your posts in the UX Academy Slack community. So for anyone that doesn't know, we have got a UX Academy Slack community, which has got all of our students, our mentors, the Designlab team, the alumni, everyone's in there who wants to be involved. And there's specific channels for job opportunities and networking and salary talk and all this stuff. So there's a lot of stuff being shared in there. And Emily does a really great job of passing anything over that she sees from Twitter and other places. So it's a really, really good place to sort of connect and network in that regard. Cool. So in regards to what employers would look for in candidates, how important do you think the trade-off is between real world projects in your portfolio, or more theoretical, not real world projects, basically? Because obviously some boot camps have all of one, some have a mixture. And how would you say that all plays out?
I feel like, so this is going to be a double-edged sword answer type of thing, because when you're in the program, right, like the capstone projects that you work on, they are kind of theoretical. Like, they could be based off of real businesses, but for the most part, they are theoretical. You won't be interacting with the client. You're not going to be able to get the feedback from them. So there's going to be certain aspects where, you just won't be able to have that experience unless you have a friend, or someone who is actually looking for someone to do design work, and they're okay with you using it as a design project. But in general, so we actually had this question come up in the UXA community. So someone was actually wondering, if it was more important to have projects that were more self-initiated, that kind of match your aesthetic of your portfolio and just kind of the projects you want to go for, versus your real world projects. Based on the answers that were given, and I agree with this too, real world projects, I would say, speak more to your abilities, just mostly because that's something you can, organically speak to if you were asked, right? But if you were working on a theoretical, I feel like there's going to be a tiny bit, of lack of confidence when you do answer those questions, because in the back of your mind, they're not real projects. They're projects that you would like to have happen, but they're not real projects where you can confidently say, yes, I worked with these stakeholders. Yes, I worked on this timeline. I worked on this deadline, whatever it is. Some of the feedback that was given was that, and some people that gave the feedback, they do interview UX designers, and they said that, to them, it is equally as important to know that you can work on a team, you can work with a team, you can work with other people, and just, be able to kind of show your soft skills through talking about your work. That's really what they look for. So, I feel like there's just not going to be enough soft skills for you to kind of, that will show through if you talk about a theoretical project versus a real project. So, I know that sometimes real projects may not look great, it's because, they are dictated by the client, or you're just not happy with what it is, but that's okay. It's the fact that you can talk about certain like pieces of the process that you went through, and so confidently you can tell them like, yes, this piece, like these pieces of data drove the design, and this is why we decided to go with this feature, or laid it out here, whatever. That's going to speak more highly to who you are as a designer and just the type of work that you can do, versus we think that all of these things should happen.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of insight there, which is really great. So it seems like kind of like a mixture of real world projects and like theoretical projects might be in the sweet spot, because then you can really go into it in a lot of depth on the and like take it in the direction that you want with the theoretical ones. But then the real world projects have more of the soft skills and like communication and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really good to know. And like, with the UX Academy program as it stands now, obviously there is that flexibility to incorporate the real world projects like you mentioned. And I think, what a lot of students I've seen do it in the past couple of months, especially in this situation, they've been reaching out to non-profits and small like charities and other companies and saying like, hey guys, I'm doing this boot camp. Like, I'd love to do some work for you, and, and put it in my portfolio. And like, obviously at this time, they'll be super grateful for that, like even more so than they would be naturally. So that's always a good idea. If anyone's sort of starting out in the program or looking ahead at their capstones, definitely try and do that if you haven't got anything lined up real world wise, because and definitely chat with your mentor about it as well, because they might have some little people that they can put you in touch with or something. You never know. Cool. So we've got a question here about like, in an interview process, like how did you go about asking for feedback? And like, was there ever a situation where you didn't hear back, or like didn't hear any feedback, or like how did that all go for you?
More often than not, you won't hear feedback. You'll get that nice template answer of, thanks for your interest, but we're going to move on with other people. And I mean, quite honestly, like, and I know that there was a question also related, how do you deal with rejection? How do you, especially if we're applying with so many jobs and stuff, honestly, like even just getting that, unfortunately, we're moving on, that template answer, they at least click through your application. They at least looked at it, right? Like, think of it that way. Like, don't think of it as just a rejection. Think of it as someone actually looked, and even though I didn't fit what they were looking for, someone still looked. That's good, right? Because you want eyes on your resume, you want eyes on your portfolio. So I would say, like, don't, you're gonna get more rejections than not. And even if you go about asking for feedback, they may not, just depending on how big or small the company is, they may not have time to give you that feedback, or they're just trying to move quickly with the recruiting process. So it really depends. I've been fortunate enough to get feedback every single time without asking for it. But there have been maybe a few times where I thought things went well, and then I didn't get the job, and I wanted to know like more about what they were looking for. And if there's anything that I could have touched on, a little bit differently and stuff like that. And really, it really wasn't to make myself feel bad or to like make them feel bad, but it's just like, I take all of that as a learning process. And a lot of that is, I would say that's a mental shift. It's definitely a mental shift for me. I'm someone who takes, like I said, like earlier, I'm a workaholic. So I take my work very seriously, sometimes too seriously sometimes. And work is a reflection of me. It's a lot, it really speaks to who I am as a person. So, if something doesn't go right, or I feel like, oh man, something could have gone better, even if no one is really saying that, like I will beat myself up for it. So I think having become a UX designer and just kind of shifting that mindset of, hey, someone looked at your application, you got to know, but that's okay. Like, it's better than not hearing anything at all, right? When we're in the dark, like that's like the worst feeling. So yeah, I would say if you want the feedback, ask for it, and just ask for it in a way where, it's going to be constructive, versus like, don't make it about you, make it about what you presented, or, what the interview was like.
Exactly. Yeah. Separate yourself as a person from your work, kind of thing. It's very important in all aspects of life, really. Yeah. Awesome. We've got a really interesting question here from Valerie, actually, who said, and obviously this is you can have an educated guess. We don't really know what's going to happen, but do you expect to see the job market stay remote, I guess, after this situation?
God, I hope so. God, I really, guys, I hope so. I am so anxious in an office environment. Like I said, I worked in retail. I worked at, support, and like, especially retail. I am, I'm on the floor, I'm customer facing all day long, but for some reason, just the idea of being in an office never appealed to me. I would rather work in a retail store all day long, than work in an office for some reason. Cause I just feel like when I'm in an office, people are constantly watching me, even though there's no one around me. I don't know. So like for me, I hope it stays remote. I think with a lot of companies realizing that, number one, it's going to take a lot of logistics to even open up an office. Is that something they even want to entertain? And then some companies are realizing that, oh my God, it's cheaper to have everyone work from home. right? Like it's so much cheaper. We don't have to feed everyone. We don't have to put out coffee for you guys. We don't have to keep the lights on. Like, so I feel like there's going to be a lot of offices that are going to realize that their overhead costs like have shrunk so dramatically that they may want to continue to capitalize on that and just allow people to, at least if not work from home remotely 100% of the time. I feel like work from home policies are probably going to loosen up a little bit more. Especially with companies who are probably harder on, no, we want you to be in the office. So I think things are shifting. I just don't think it'll be as fast as we hope, but kind of forced into it. So we kind of have no choice, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's definitely boosted it along because like, what else can you do at this point? Yeah, awesome. So just as a more general question here. So like, oh, I've lost it now. Where's it gone? Like, oh, there we go. What were the like general and sort of main differences that stood out, like difficulties, that stood out to you when you transitioned into your first UX role, and how did you sort of progress through all of that?
So if you guys haven't read my Medium article that I wrote in 2017 that still gets views today, it's basically like, hire me, I swear I can do the job. Like that's basically the title. But you know, I come from non-design, and you know, I know I sit there and I'm like, but all of my soft skills translate. But how do you translate soft skills onto a piece of paper, right? So I would say like, it's not just UX, but one of the most frustrating parts about job hunting is that what you put on your resume is the first impression that recruiters get. So unfortunately, that is kind of what they take away from it. So I would say, you know, like, you know, write all the things that you can do on your resume, but put your voice into it. Actually put your personality into it. You know, have a mini profile, like a mini blurb, like an about me at the top. Like so for me, this is a controversial thing, guys, but I hate writing cover letters. I will not apply to a job that actually requires me to write a cover letter, because my mentor, he's probably bad influence too, but he did a lot of hiring. He was like, I don't have time to read cover letters, guys. I don't have time to read 3 paragraphs of stuff. So what he told me to do instead was to do a 3 to 4 blurb about myself at the top of my resume. And I do, it's my profile. And it's essentially a mini cover letter that just dives right into the person that I am, the approach that I take, and, you know, what I would like to achieve as a designer, and like what I can, you know, offer to them. So that's kind of my take on it. So, you know, put your own personal voice and your spin on your resume. Don't have it just, you know, list out all the things that you can do in like the most PG way possible, I guess. Like, you know, actually have some personality in it, and it'll show for sure.
Awesome. And with that in mind, like, how important do you think your social media presence is as a designer? Like, would you, I know you're not a big fan or not like naturally sort of towards the visual design side of things, but, you know, for people that are or otherwise, like, what would you reckon about Instagram or Pinterest or, you know, Dribble, Behance, any of these sites? What would you recommend that people do ahead so that when they're being hunted by employers, like what they find basically?
So when I was in career services, my career coach was like, I know you don't want to, but just set up a Twitter and, you know, do this thing on LinkedIn, and, you know, make sure your pictures and everything are kind of like in alignment, stuff like that. So initially, like I use like the same imagery and colors and everything across like my sites. But then as time went on, I looked at Twitter 0% of the time. So I was like, forget it. I've actually picked back up on it, but it's mostly for Designlab, guys. Like I'm really on Twitter for Designlab, not for myself. But like, it's a hit or miss. Like if you feel like you can display, like if, like, you know, like you said, like if you're more of a visual or UI designer and you feel like you can better display your work through a more gallery type view versus like a portfolio view, I wouldn't say only have social media in lieu of a portfolio, but if you do have things that you are proud of, or, you know, you constantly share articles that intrigue you, or, you know, topics that you find interesting, those are the things that you can share to social media. And that kind of gives you your voice too. You know, people will start noticing like, oh, you know, so-and-so posts a lot about, you know, this topic, or, you know, they love research, stuff like that. Like people do notice. And I guess that's the downfall and beauty of Twitter, is that everything is visible unless you choose it to not, like, for it to not be. So you do get a lot of eyes on your stuff, you know, a bunch of random people. But I mean, for the most part, like, yeah, I would say like I wouldn't say it's super important. I would say it's as important as you want it to be. Like I've gotten away with not having any social media related to design at all, but that's also because I'm not a visual designer. I have nothing pretty to show, guys. I just have really horrible sketches, and that's about it. And a lot of posts.
Oh, I'm sure they're not that bad. Cool. We've got a really interesting question here as well, actually. What do you do now, like, to keep yourself up to date with the industry? Is there anything that you do on a day-to-day basis to, like, keep yourself progressing in the field and all that type of thing?
I manage a Designlab community. That's really what keeps me up to date. Like seriously, like I mean, like I said, like I finished the program in 2017. I've been a designer since, but really it's the community that really keeps me going and keeps me engaged, because every time we launch a new cohort, I am learning something new. I run group critique sessions, and even in those sessions I learn something new. It could be a new perspective, new way to look at things, you know, a new tool. Like I learn something new all the time, and it's because of the community and the fact that we encourage everyone to share all of their resources, and that we are here to help each other grow. We're here to help each other learn. Like UX, like it's such a collaborative field, which I love. Like it's more often than not, it's not about ego. It's like we really do advocate for the users, and if we do have any ego, it's to advocate for the users. Like it has nothing to do with our own personal preferences, what we like or dislike. Like we will like or dislike for the user, but that's about it. Like we take ourselves out of the equation. So yeah.
Leave the egos at the door, people. Yeah. Yeah. So on that note, actually, like obviously, you know, I think some people naturally think if it's an online program, there's I'm going to be on my own. There's no community around me. So actually, I guess you might as well wrap up by you just like go full gung ho, talk about the Designlab community, like, and also the group crit sessions, because I think people who haven't experienced those before might like to hear a bit about what that involves and like why they're so valuable, etc.
Yeah, so you know, we have an awesome Slack community, and it's grown since I was a student, probably because I was that student who was like, hey, Designlab, can we do this? Can we add this? Can we do? So that's actually how I got started working with Designlab, was me just telling our ops person like, hey, this would be great if we XYZ. And then eventually it was, do you want to manage this? Because you can, because I don't have time for it. So now group crits was actually, it's the first role I kind of assumed with Designlab, and now I actually run a team of facilitators. I do run sessions, and guys, I cannot express like how important critiques are, and we call them group crits, but you know, wherever else it could be peer reviews, it's, you know, feedback loops, whatever it is. But the reason why they're so important is because, like we keep mentioning, UX is such an iterative process. Like imagine, I'm sure we've all been down this road. You work on a project from end to end, and then people finally have time to look at your stuff, and then they rip everything apart, and then you have to go back and you're like wanting to pull your hair out, right? So the beauty of UX is that we encourage weekly feedback. So through these sessions, you know, through group crit sessions, through sessions with your mentor, you know, we want you guys to get the feedback as soon as possible and as often as possible. So you're making changes incrementally before you get to the end, because it's so infuriating, right? And a lot of people, you know, often wonder, you know, what the differences are between my mentor session and, you know, my group crit session. So how I like to frame a group critique session is we basically try to simulate what your design team meeting would look like. So for anyone who's been a designer, like I'm sure you guys have had your design team meetings, like weekly meetings where you guys check in every week, you know, what have I been working on? Is there anything that, you know, is completed? You know, what am I blocked on? You know, what do I need help with? It's really just a time for students to really practice how to present their work, present their thoughts, present their ideas, you know, defend their decisions and their design process. And then a chance for people who are listening to be able to really listen and engage with, and then also, you know, ask like, oh, you know, say like, oh, I love, you know, how you laid this out, you know, but I was just curious, you know, why did you choose this icon over whatever? You know, a lot of group crits is knowing how to ask why, and learning how to like seek that kind of feedback. Like, again, like it's not about us. Like we're like, I think a lot of people think about group crits and they just get so anxious. They're like, oh my God, like everyone's going to judge me for my work. Everyone's like, you know, I'm new, like, I don't know what I'm doing. Everyone like who has gone through UXA, like they've all been there. Everyone has been there. Like that week 1, week 2, that feeling of I'm not, like, there's no way I'm going to be able to present in front of everyone else. Just know that in these sessions, like the goal is for everyone to help each other. Again, like we're all here to learn. We're all here to grow through what we learn from each other. Because sometimes what you see that someone else does, you're like, oh, that's what I thought, you know, that's what it's missing from my work, you know, stuff like that. So like, you don't know. So like these groups become very tight knit. So you get, you know, you do often see a lot of the same people in there. So you get to know people on a more personal level on a weekly basis. So it's really cool. Like it is kind of like coming to your team meeting and just talking with people that you know exist, but you don't talk to on a regular basis. But it's so fun, guys. Like, so yeah, that is my spiel on group crits and then the community. And so yeah, so we have tons of Slack channels. We have area specific channels. You know, we encourage that, you know, people in some, you know, like certain areas that, you know, you guys can try to meet up virtually now, maybe in person in the future. But yeah, so we have so many things that we're so excited to try, and that we've recently tried, to kind of engage, everyone else with each other more. And I think like it's really starting to show through, like everyone's even more engaged. Like more people are posting things now that where I don't have to post a lot. Like normally I'm trying to get people to post and, like my post and all that, but now everyone's like on board.
It's coming through every day, isn't it? I love on in the morning, there's like loads of stuff going on. So
it's awesome.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. And I think on the note of the group crits, like there are quite a few people that, they are quite scared of like, presenting and stuff at the beginning. But I remember there was one student a couple of months ago, and he actually said that the only reason why he could do a speech at his best friend's wedding was because of the group crits, because he was so scared of public speaking. I don't know if you didn't know that before, Emily, but yeah, he was so scared of public speaking before the program, and the group crits alone helped him do a speech at his friend's wedding, which is obviously so sweet. And so that shows the power of the group crits, not just for the design crit kind of environment, but like just for the power of the public speaking experience, and like just how much you can grow in that way through the program as well. So it's fab. Cool. Well, I think we're going to wrap things up now, guys, but I just want to say thank you so much to everyone who's attended.
Thank you, everyone.
Such fantastic questions, and we got through quite a lot of the ones that were upvoted a lot. So I hope you helped out. I do want to say that we are actually, if any questions specifically, my video is going crazy. Any questions specifically on the UX Academy program itself, we have actually got another webinar tomorrow, a bit earlier tomorrow, which is actually our admissions open house, which is going to talk about the product the program in more depth, and you'll hear more stuff about the structure of the program, how the content's delivered, all of that type of stuff. I'm just going to put the link to that in the chat now. So that's our admissions open house webinar. It's also on the top banner on our website. So if you want to learn more about the program, feel free to sign up for that. That's going to happen tomorrow. It happens every Thursday. And then, for anything else, you can also have a look at our help centre, which is, I'm just put the link to that there. Emily, is there anything that you want to wrap up with?
No, no. So, thank you guys for coming to this webinar. It is the first kind of alumni Q&A that we're officially doing. This will be uploaded to YouTube, guys. So I'm going to sound like a broken record, but go to our YouTube channel, please subscribe, like our videos, all that stuff. We did do a webinar with Adobe last week on prototyping, and we had a one prior to that, which was more intro to Adobe XD. Tons and tons of information in both of those webinars. We will be doing more with Adobe. We will be doing more with other partners. So if you guys are part of the community, and there are tools or people that you think that we should partner with to do webinars with, let me know, ping me on Slack, and I will try to get that going. But thank you guys so much for being here. It was awesome. Hopefully I answered a lot of everyone's questions, kind of calm some nerves.
Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, how do we find the YouTube videos? That is a great question, Dawn. Let me just quickly find that for you. So I'll put it in the chat quickly, so that you can have the link to that. Basically, they get uploaded, I think it's a couple of days after the session, isn't it, Emily? So the people should be able to find those online. Let me just ping that in the chat now quickly. So that, I think, is our YouTube channel. Yes, it is. Okay, so I ping that in the chat there. So anyone who wants to watch any of the prior webinars, you can do. There's the ones with Adobe that I mentioned. We've got ones about building your portfolio in Webflow with one of our mentors, Kieran. He's done quite a few little sessions with us about different things like animations and all sorts. So yeah, definitely check those out. And obviously, Emily, if you've got any other ideas for webinars, anything else that you want to hear, or any, topics or tools that you want to learn more about, let her know and she will get it organized. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, guys, for your time. Have a great rest of your day, and obviously you'll receive a recording of this so you can catch up with it again at some point if you want, and yeah, we hope to see you on another webinar soon. Bye, guys.
Bye.